I think all the, let's call them Gen Z. I'm forever corrected by friends, so it's Gen Z, but actually Gen Z is what sticks now. I think the generation that have been joining the workforce in the last 5 years, purpose matters very much to them. We've got some brilliantly talented people going into the workplace who are much more expressive than, I'm Gen X, much more expressive in what they want than my generation was. And I wouldn't have asked, when I was 22, 23, what the purpose of an organisation was. But today it really matters.
Hi, I'm Belden Menkus. Welcome to the Purposeful Strategist, the podcast that shifts the conversation about purpose and strategy from what organizations should do to what business leaders are doing and what they've learned along the way. My guest today is Olly Purnell, co-founder and managing partner of Q5, a management consulting firm that specializes in organizational health. The firm has expertise in design, strategy, culture, technology, and change. Since its founding in 2008, Q5 has grown from 5 founders working in a converted basement in London to a team of over 300 people with a reach that spans Europe, North America, the Middle East and Africa, and Asia Pacific. Q5's stated purpose is we're here to build healthy organizations to propel people, economies, and societies forward. Olly, really glad to have you here on the Purposeful Strategist podcast. Thanks for joining us.
Belden, thanks very much for having me. It's great to be here.
Let me just start with a sort of an origin question. Why did you start Q5? What was the problem you were trying to solve or the opportunity you were trying to chase?
It was myriad things, in fact. Like often is the case, I think, when you set up a business. I can talk about the content of what we were trying to do, but it was also a moment in my life. I was in my mid to late 30s. I had 3 little girls, aged between 0 and 5, and I realized I wanted to have a bit more autonomy and a bit more control in how I was going to lead my professional life and manage my family life. And so that was genuinely one of the driving forces too. From a content point of view, for the previous 15 years, I had got my energy from working on organizational change. I enjoyed helping senior business leaders who were trying to transform an organization to take it from A to B. I enjoyed the organizational hardwiring of doing that, of trying to work out what the workflow would be, how you would configure the teams. That is really very much where I got my energy from. So I thought, this is the perfect moment. I've got some experience behind me. There was a little crew of people that I had got to know over many years professionally that were all pretty much at the same place as me from a family point of view and also professionally from the type of work that they did. And it seemed like the right time to do it.
Olly, I've known you for quite some number of years. I also know you always bring a certain spin or unique perspective to that. Is there anything more you'd want to say about that? The flavor, the nuance, the whatever of what you were trying to do.
Belden, it's been a privilege for me to know you. You and I have known each other, probably it straddles about 3 decades now. I spent the first 8 years or so of my career at Accenture, and then I spent a few years working in a small consulting firm where you and I both worked, a company called 7 Days. And I think I was very lucky in many respects to have a major, huge consulting brand behind me and all the development and training that I got back in the 1990s, flying out to Chicago on a regular basis to do training at a place called St. Charles, getting to know lots and lots of people, a fabulous network that I met in the mid to late 90s. Then actually the complete opposite experience of working in a very, very small firm where there were probably 10 to 15 of us and knowing, and in fact recognizing very early on, you don't need a massive brand behind you in order to do some exhilaratingly fun work with senior business leaders. And that was quite an epiphany for me, because I think anyone listening to this podcast who works in a big 4 firm or in one of the MBB firms, and I know you worked at McKinsey's back in the day, and obviously I've mentioned my Accenture background, you're quite rightly conditioned to think early in your career that this is brilliant, this is as good as it gets. You are surrounded with the brightest of the bright. You're learning with the best in the business, and there is no place better than here to do your consulting work. And you can't possibly go and set your own firm up or work for a small firm because you won't be able to work with these deals, these amazing projects. That is actually poppycock. You can do many interesting things, setting up your own business or joining a small firm. So that 5 years or so after my Accenture career taught me a lot. It taught me a lot about entrepreneurialism. It taught me about how you build a brand identity. And it taught me a little bit about how you can put together high-performing teams of consultants with genius strategists like yourself, Belden, to people who are facilitators, to other people who love doing data analytics.
You've got a very clear purpose, which I sort of read before. How did you get to that? Was that like the day one you sat down, the five of you wrote that out, or has it been a bit of a process? How'd that come about?
For the five of us that set the company up right from the outset, we pretty much knew what we were trying to do. And so we had a very clear vision that we wanted to focus on organizational health. We believe all companies, all organizations need to be run in a healthy way. And that means having a very clear, cogent strategy, an understanding of the direction of travel you're trying to take your business, that the way that you work, the processes that you do are aligned to delivering that, that the people that work there are configured in a way that enables that, and that they also emotionally and intellectually understand it and therefore motivated to deliver that. Other things too, good things like making sure that what you're doing is sustainable and lasting and economically viable. But if you're able to follow those things, then your business or your public sector entity should do very well. And we utterly believed that that was a fun thing to go and do. And we wanted to do it as a little group of people because we thought there was a niche to do that. There were a few companies who did it on the periphery, but we wanted to absolutely specialize in it. So the driving purpose to that was there from the outset.
You've got a, I think, really interesting set of values. And if you don't mind, I'll read them out just so people know what they are. Even the way you've worded them, I think, is great. We never settle, listen and challenge, leaders and self-starters, straightforward and transparent. We are passionate, work together. How did they come about? And are they a more recent kind of re-articulation of something that might have been there for a while?
They were very much things that we believed in at the very beginning. The actual words that we now use, the vernacular, the tone of voice, they've been developed more recently. Not that recently. I mean, they're probably about 10, 12 years old. You've read out the values behind them. So, for example, on the one you've just talked about, we listen to, respect and challenge each other's views. There is a sub-point underneath it, which is we may not always agree with one another, and that's fine. This is like our creed in a way. Our company, we have a manual that everyone receives when they join the business that explains the provenance of Q5, explains the history of what we were doing, and articulates our values, because it's really important in business to be able to not always agree with things and find a very sensible, convivial and uplifting way to move forward if you don't necessarily have agreement. So those values, the words we've used, we developed when we were a team of about 50 in an off-site, and we then made sure that the words were right for the people. But more than that, Belden, these values, we don't just live them and bring them up in conversation, we hire against them. So we have created a system now that our recruiting team use. We have personas, and they go through a gamification process, and we test whether people settle or not. We test how much of a leader or a self-starter they are through a gamification process that is sent to them as a link on their smartphone. And so everyone that comes into our business has been assessed against that. It's not just the academics or the experience and capability that people have got in their history. It's whether they are the sorts of people who are going to live these values, because we think these are the values that make successful consultants. So it really is the blood that runs through our veins.
Mm-hmm. And how do those values support your purpose?
That's a good question. When you are thinking, are the people going to do the best work they possibly can? Is the work they're going to do going to be valuable work? Is it going to be able to take a business forward? And is that business going to be able to make a meaningful contribution to the world through, paying its taxes and investing in the local communities? Those sorts of values will lead to that. So never settling, always being curious, always wanting to see what the latest thinking is. A couple of years ago when Gen AI became a thing, I was getting in touch with people at Google, at other companies, said, we'd like to be involved in beta testing. We'd like to send some people over if you can for a week or two to get to know what you're doing. In terms of self-starters and leaders, we're quite a small business in consulting terms, but we've got 8 or 9 offices now in places like Muscat, in Riyadh, in Melbourne. And what tends to happen at Q5 is those people who have those types of attributes want to go and launch a new business in a different part of the world. And we actively encourage that. We have a lot of intercompany movement from people that have done 2 or 3 years in London that go down to Sydney for a few years. And we've got a lot of Australians in London. And we've got people in New York and in Houston too. So our values really do meaningfully translate into the day-to-day way that we work and challenge one another and constantly try and create new ideas and new ways of working.
You've kind of answered the next question I was going to ask, but I'm going to ask it anyway, just in case maybe there's a bit of it that we might have missed. You say you're still small, but in some ways you're pretty punchy. International presence, et cetera, et cetera. How do you make sure that the purpose and the values and all stay alive with people who are working in lots of different areas and maybe don't see the founders, don't see HQ very often?
Yeah, well, we have hires, whether you're in Oman or whether you're in Australia. We bring in very talented local hires, but we will always have someone that has been in the business for a period of time to set up a company with them. So, for example, in Australia, we've got a great team, very good, experienced Australian colleagues, but also one of my co-founders is there. One of the people that set Q5 up with me 16 years ago is based in Australia because that's what we do. That's how we make sure that the quality of our brand and what we're trying to do translates itself into a new market. The Middle East is very different from the Anglo-Saxon mentality of New York and London. Again, hiring locally, and we've got some great people from London that have gone over there, are able to create a way of doing Q5 work with a style and with a vernacular that suits the Saudi Arabian business landscape or the Omani landscapes, which is a little bit different. And again, in North America, interestingly, we've been there 11 years now. Some of the brand story of what we do doesn't necessarily translate all that well on the East Coast. My observation in recent years is a lot of New York, Boston, DC businesses and business leaders still like going for the tried and tested, well-known consulting brands, which is a bit different in Europe, actually. People like the brands that have got founders running them. They like the entrepreneurialism of that. But certainly the East Coast of America, there is much more of a, let's go for a BCG, let's go for a McKinsey. So there, the words organizational health don't have quite the cachet that they have perhaps in Europe and Australasia. We, over the course of the last few months, have been changing our language a little bit, which almost, breaks the rules of brand identity, changing the messaging a bit to suit different markets.
What's the nuance?
Originally, when we started with the idea of the organizational health, we talked about it being organizational physiotherapy. It just didn't work. You're American, Belden. You've lived here for a long time. You know more than most. There are certain phrases that mean things. And what we're using in North America now is the expression beyond the blueprint, whether it's leadership beyond the blueprint or organizational transformation beyond the blueprint. It's stating what it is and then saying it's beyond the obvious. We're taking it off the page and we're coming up with something that's inventive, different, and fresh.
Yeah, I like that. Could you describe the strategy that's sort of driven your growth so far?
Well, it's a good question. If you'd asked me 16 years ago when I set the company up with my 4 co-founders, the strategy was to do really interesting organizational change work, organizational health work in London, because we were all had young children. We wanted to be able to go home in the evening and, bath our babies and see our partners. So the strategy was quite a simple one. It was, for the next few years, let's do something that we enjoy doing and have that control. And if we can make a living out of it, great. Fast forward to now, if you'd said to me in 2008, 2009, you're going to be hiring people in Riyadh and Jeddah and Houston, I would have looked at you and thought that was balmy. But what we do has a genuine place in the boardroom. The types of clients that we work with are CEOs, CFOs and chairs. And I think our strategy now very much is we're an extension of the office of the CEO. And we're the intel inside. We bring pragmatism. We bring an entrepreneurial bent to what we do, because we're 100% owned by our people. Every decision that we've made, every bet that we've made has largely come off. We have a highly commercial view as to how to run business as we run our own. When a business leader's talking to us, we can speak viscerally. No, if this was our business, this is how we would do it. And this is what we did when we opened up in Amman, in Muscat, for instance. So our strategy is one of building the brand, extending our reach, and most importantly, driving profitable growth. So there are three words from the moment someone joins our company, whether they're in their 50s or whether they're straight out of university, which is influence, reach, and contribution. And so we're building trust and authority in organizational health. Every article we write, every event that we host has got to be around a topic that is organizational health. And when we extend our reach, Belden, my background, I did a lot of work in media back in the day, and a lot of our early clients were media clients. But we've extended our reach into new industry sectors and into new geographies. But it's been done in a way that builds momentum. And when it comes to contribution, we don't work for free. And there are a lot of consulting firms over the years that do work on a pro bono basis. Well, that's a pro bono makes it sound charitable. We'll do a free piece of work for 4 weeks or for 6 weeks in the hope that, or sometimes on the promise that will lead to something bigger. The pro bono work that we do is through our foundation. We have a thing called pop-up consulting. We do about £1 million worth of pro bono work a year for charities. For 3 or 4 days a time, we work with about 30 or 40 charities a year. Really clear about the work that we do in consulting is to be paid for in the commercial sector, and anyone that comes to us and asks us to do something for free or to test us out, we don't do it.
Can I tell a little story that for me captures the entrepreneurial and to some extent almost lighthearted spirit that I've always noted about Q5?
Yeah.
It's when a big global brand moved into a new HQ, almost like literally around the corner from you. And you reached out, wrote them a letter, and basically said, "Hi, we're your local neighborhood management consultants. Can we have a chat?" And turned into a great client for you.
That's right.
I just think that's brilliant.
We did half a decade with that FTSE 100 company, and it was really very interesting relationship that we had. That's the fun that you can have with your own brand, that you are at liberty to do whatever you want to do with it. So if you join a company like Q5, we want people to be able to have a bit of fun with it and to try to be incomparable. And actually the brand expression, trying things out, doing things that a big four firm daren't try out or can't try out because they have to operate by a certain set of brand values and diktat. That's the fun you can have with a smaller company. And I think we are very entrepreneurial. We like that.
So what do you see in the future for Q5? What do you see as the next frontiers for you?
So we've been doing a couple of things in the last few years. I mentioned those three words: influence, reach, and contribution. The senior team that we have in place and those leaders in our business that have joined us over the last 12, 13, 14 years passionately believe in organizational health. We've got some people that specialize in the strategy of it. We've got other people that specialize in the technology implementation of it. So I think from what we stand for, from the core of what we believe in, that will still propel us forward. I see us continuing to expand our reach into new sectors. We get a thrill out of opening new offices. It's a fun thing to do, and we've got a pretty good tried and tested formula for doing that. And then the other key thing we've been doing is we've been building our own platforms and tech over the last 2 years or so, because we want our team not only to be, from an insight point of view, brilliant and knowledgeable about organizational health, we want the tooling that we use to be the best. So we have built products with developers that we hire on an annual basis. We have a thing called Activity Q, which is a brilliant workflow analysis tool. We have another tool called Org Maps that is absolutely brilliant, that was developed about 18 months ago.
What does Org Maps do?
So Org Maps, you can take any data from any ERP system, put it into Org Maps, and over a very, very quick period of time, we will look at the spans and layers of an organization. We'll look at the cost base of an organization, from a wage arbitrage point of view, with the link into workflow analysis. And we haven't at this moment in time made it available for companies to buy from us. We at the moment equip our own team. So we've got a data analytics hub that does all the analysis, which we launched about a year and a half ago. And then we've got a team of people that will use Org Maps to analyze the data. And it's much, much quicker process for us to do the as-is analysis. Our clients love it. They think it's absolutely brilliant. And it makes our team not only compelling, it makes us look like we've got the tooling to make them the world-beating org health consultants that we say they are.
Yeah. Changing the subject just a little bit, if you think back over your time leading the firm, which is really the history of the whole firm, is there anything you'd do differently in hindsight?
My long pause is because I have been very, very, very lucky. And I set a business up with people who didn't really know each other. I knew them. I was the link to them all. And the mélange, the mix, worked. And the people that we have hired over time, possibly through the forensic approach I've spoken about, our values and the way we assess and analyze people coming in, has largely worked very well. So in terms of the people I have worked with, I don't think I'd have done anything differently at all. There are many things we can do better. And I think a lot of consulting firms, a lot of professional services firms need to be more diverse. Our gender diversity is very good, but we need to be more diverse for sure. So looking forward, I'd like to definitely have a more diverse workforce. But in terms of looking back, I'm really a very lucky person.
So kind of on a lighter note, if I understand it right, you play piano to relax, and at one point managed a perhaps lower league, but nevertheless a football club, Clapham Rovers. Have any of those influenced how you run the business, or sort of given you transferable skills?
Yes, is the very quick response to your question. Absolutely, definitely. And I'm speaking very personally when I say this, because there are obviously other founders of Q5 and there are other leaders in the business. But for me, the football element, if I grew up in South London, and anyone that knows me knows that I was from a very young lad a Wimbledon Football Club fan. And then in 2002, the club set up again, AFC Wimbledon, because the original club was moved to Milton Keynes. Very bad decision that was made by the football authorities at the time. But the one thing about that football club, the amazing phoenix-like rising from the ashes to become a fantastic community-focused club, and that football club in the 1970s and 1980s came from non-league to the top flight in 9 years and then won the FA Cup. It was extraordinary, with very little money. It hired and signed players on free transfers. And for them, and even to this day with AFC Wimbledon, it's about the culture of the team. It's about the community outreach. It's about creating an identity. It's a very, very authentic club with a very authentic way of doing things that plays to its strengths. And I think with Q5, we've always wanted to be authentic and we've always wanted to create a community and a series of different communities. Our retail practice is different to our media practice, which is different to our energy practice. But there's a very cohesive community. That's absolutely come from my point of view. It's something I've always espoused from an early time. The other thing on the music front, we do festivals, and when we turned 10, we hired a field in Kent, and we hosted a festival called Q Fest. And last summer, we used the AFC Wimbledon Stadium in Plough Lane to host something called Cirque de Q5, which is a combination of family fun day football, and we had 5 different bands. Some were bands belonging to Q5 colleagues, plus the Q5 house bands that's called Motley Q. Yeah. You obviously remember Motley Crue, but
yes.
And every Christmas, the Motley Q ensemble produce a Christmas song that's released on LinkedIn and on Spotify. So music is, again, one of the communities within our firm that gives its inventiveness, its freshness. For me, absolutely has been something that has given us a bit of a heartbeat.
Sometimes that whole bring your whole self to work, bring the stuff that's a joyous expression of who you are and what you're interested in, which I think is brilliant.
That's absolutely true. You can see on the values that you were talking through earlier on, bring your true selves to work is a key thing. We've got in our company, we have a former Master Chef contestant who for the last 5 years has hosted a Christmas pudding making evening in November, and we probably produce 180 Christmas puddings every November. It is mayhem. The ground floor of our office is a riot of suet and raisin, but it's fun and it's incomparable. It's different. It is genuinely different. It's a pretty authentic expression of people who bring what they're passionate about into work, and we work very, very hard. And I think our clients appreciate that we're a nice crew of people to work with.
Any advice you might give to other business leaders as they think about purpose and strategy for their organization?
The first thing I would say is purpose is so important. And I think that any modern business leader in the 2020s that doesn't believe in it and doesn't emotionally get it is going to be on a hiding to nothing. I think all the, let's call them Gen Z. I'm forever corrected by friends, so it's Gen Z, but actually Gen Z is what sticks now. I think the generation that have been joining the workforce in the last 5 years, purpose matters very much to them. We've got some brilliantly talented people going into the workplace who are much more expressive than, I'm Gen X, much more expressive in what they want than my generation was. And I wouldn't have asked, when I was 22, 23, what the purpose of an organization was. But today it really matters. So I think any business leader that hasn't got their head around that is going to come a cropper.
So just a little bit picking up on what you were talking about there, if you had advice for someone who is entering the workforce or maybe thinking about a shift in direction for themselves, what would that be?
I think if you've just left school or just left college or university, the world of work that community is joining is so different to the world of work when I started 30 years ago. My advice to them is your 20s, the first 10 years of your career, can be very fun and very adventurous, but you need to get a feel. Genuinely, I was about 31 when I realized what it was I loved in the world of work. And I think I would say to people in their 20s to go and do 2 or 3 things. And, and there may well be employees of mine listening to this podcast thinking, well, I've been at Q5 for 4 years, 5 years. Olly's just tried to suggest I should go somewhere else. If they absolutely love what they're doing and they're learning from it, and it gives them their sense of purpose, and they find that the values and the rhythm of the work suits them, well, don't go. Enjoy it, build your career, continue with the momentum. Momentum is everything. But I don't think you can just be on the carousel and spend 15, 18 years hopping off every 2 years. I think you do need to find your rhythm if you want to go into the world of consulting. you get this massive smorgasbord of different projects and different industries and different brands, and it's a brilliant place to start your career. Actually, if you're returning to work, maybe you've taken time out, or you've had a child and you're returning to work and it's not quite right for you, then I'm a big believer in your network. I would advocate that people should go out and seek informal mentorship from people and to speak very openly about what it is that they think is going to motivate them. And it's really important that you go and speak to your leaders in your organization and say, look, what I needed 2 or 3 years ago has changed a bit. And it may be that it's easy to remedy that within that organization. But if the gap is too large, then don't think twice about moving on.
Yeah. Anything we haven't touched on that you'd like listeners to know?
That's such a good question. I mean, that's such an expansive. That's an entire podcast series, Belden.
Perhaps.
For me, it's a mutual thing. For me, I would love your listeners to be able to communicate with you and with me. I would like a bit of clairvoyance from your listeners. If they were looking forward based on the industry sectors they work in, it would be fascinating to see what their predictions for the future are, because it would be incredibly helpful. I always love hearing people's views and forecasts and predictions, and I use the word again, clairvoyance. I'd be keen to hear other people's views of what the future holds, because I love that type of discussion and debate.
So if they want to get hold of me, it'll be belden@menkus.com. If they want to send it direct to you, Olly, where do you want them to send it?
So it's oliver.purnell, Purnell, at q5partners.com.
Brilliant. I'll make sure that's also in the show notes.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Olly, it's been as always, it's been great to chat. I always find your enthusiasm and your energy and your somewhat different take on things really fantastic, uplifting, energizing. So thanks for joining us.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Belden. It's been fun speaking with you.
All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us for this episode of The Purposeful Strategist. In addition to being available on our website, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. If you enjoyed this episode, please do follow us and leave us a 5-star review. It helps others find the podcast. Thanks again, and join us soon for the next episode of The Purposeful Strategist.